Good evening. Welcome to this series of teachings, which I've been calling Experiencing the Buddha's Teachings. And so we are now at a module that I called Navigating the Highs and Lows of Our Life. And this is a sort of a mini conclusion, a way of summarizing and what we have covered so far in the teaching called Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, which is what I'm following and sort of slowly going through the different topics listed in this particular presentation. We are actually covering a section that is called Small Scope. The entire series of topics that made up what we call the stages of the path to enlightenment can be grouped into three different scopes: self-explanatory, small scope, intermediate scope, great scope. So we have the small scope. What is so small about it? Small because the scope of our motivation is more modest, and maybe the height of our aspiration are also more modest. We are more concerned at the small scope level with my happiness, my immediate happiness here and now, my short-term happiness, my long-term happiness, but nonetheless still pretty much understandable. That's what most of us, all of us in the world, that's what we are concerned about. So that is the level of our motivation and aspiration. How can I be happy? Not only on the short term, but also the long term. And this is we're going through the Buddhist take on it. Yeah. So under this this section, we have previously covered a few topics. We touch on appreciating our precious human life. We touch on cultivating awareness of death, the topic of refuge, and the topic of karma. And if you look at it, these few topics from a certain perspective, so first and foremost is to really be able to appreciate what we have enjoyed, and what we still have, our wonderful human life, and to be able to see it and value it is something really important, and really form a good foundation for building other causes and conditions that contribute to our sense of well-being, a sense of happiness, to really appreciate our life as something unique, unrepeatable, and for all the wonderful freedoms and opportunities it offer to us to find happiness, to be happy. Right. So, and moreover, cultivating awareness of death really enhance, instead of depleting it, which is how people tend to think about death, a topic that we rather not go anywhere near it. We don't want to talk about it. Don't remind me of it. In Chinese heritage, my background when I was young, talking about death is taboo, especially on the New Year's Day. The Lunar New Year is the day where everything should be auspicious. You never say anything inauspicious, otherwise the year would be terrible, bad luck for the rest of the year. And when I was young, I tend to do the opposite, as young kids tend to do. When told not to say any word that is related to death, early in the morning on New Year's Day, I'll be screaming at the top of my lungs, just the word death, just to be contradictory. Yeah. So awareness of death does not actually take away, or does not actually increase despair or misfortune. Instead, it helps us to really appreciate and value and cherish what we have, because this life will come to an end. And it is precisely because it has an end, and also we have no way of knowing when that is happening, make us all the more value what we now have, and we want to make good use of it, right? And what will be helpful while we're alive, and even to when we face difficulties or even death, is to have a reliable refuge, something trustworthy that we can rely on and that will support us, support us in helping us to be free of suffering, or to face suffering and to deal with it, deal with all the challenges and difficulties. Another way of looking at refuge is actually that it gives us a sense of direction. It helps to orientate us. It shows us a way forward, forward to achieve what we want to achieve happiness. And refuge can also be understood that way. In fact, many years ago, this Western Buddhist teacher, Alex Berzin, he has this wonderful website. I think he put up, used to be called Berzin Archives. I'm not sure whether they changed the name. So you can Google. There's wonderful collections of translation of teachings, Tibetan Buddhist teachings, as well as the teachings from Alex Berzin himself, or teaching from his teachers that he has translated in the past. It's a good resource if you are interested. Alex Berzin at one point put out a book, which is his translation of one of the Lamrim texts, one of the teaching on stages of the path to enlightenment, in which he tried on many very innovative translation terms of classic Buddhist words. Yeah, I'm not sure how many of them caught on. Translation is a little bit like fashion, whether you might try different terms and some become fashionable and everybody use it, and whereas others, we just got forgotten. Yeah, and he translate going for refuge as taking a safe direction. So that was a very innovative translation of the word refuge, but it conveyed the sense that having refuge means also having a clear sense of direction, where you are heading, what are your aspirations, what are your motivations. At a time when we are lost, when we are overwhelmed with confusion, with stress, with all the uncertainty of life and insecurities, great turmoil within and without, refuge could very well be just knowing where to go, where we are heading, and that if we are able to keep to that direction, eventually we will arrive at a safe place. So refuge. And karma is the active component of the Buddha's teaching. Karma means at any moment we excuse me, at any moment we make choices, and each one of those choices, be it big or small, each of those actions we commit or we refrain from, all of those actions, what we call karma, have a real impact on ourselves and on others and on the environment. The actions have consequences. They don't just disappear or become wasted. Each one of them cumulatively can have tremendous impact on our own well-being, on happiness, as well as the well-being and happiness of others. So when you put all this four together, they paint an image, a very positive, uplifting image, and by reflecting on them, contemplating on them, they able to contribute to our happiness, our pursuit of happiness. Yeah, which is seems to be the catchphrase this day. After all, we do have a conference organized by Vajrayana Institute called "Happiness and Its Causes." Yeah, and this module that I'm going through, and I started last week, that I call "Navigating the Highs and Lows of Our Life." We're going to look at 4 pairs of contrasting experiences in our life. I think something got into my throat today. Last week we looked at pleasure and pain, which is a very common set of experiences, contrasting experiences, and that really impact us. And the other 3 pairs, and today we're going to look at another one, is gain and loss, which to which we also have strong reactions. Excuse me. So, how do we define happiness? Most of the time, you will find that in relation to these 4 pairs, the other last 2 pairs are praise and blame or criticism, and usually it's called fame and bad reputation. I like to actually think of it as having others' good opinions and as suffering other people's bad opinions of us. Yeah. You'll find that it's very common for us to define happiness of this life, in relation to how we feel about these 4 pairs of experiences. We might tend to equate happiness with 4 of them: the pleasure, the gain, the praises, and having been famous, having a lot of people's positive, good regard, good opinion. And we may define unhappiness with pain, associate that with pain, with losses, with blames or criticisms, and with having others' bad regard, poor regard, or disregard, others' bad opinions of us. Yeah. And so in the teaching on small scope, we are investigating this association, this very almost seems taken for granted association, that to be happy is to have this 4, and if we end up with the other 4, we are doomed for unhappiness or suffering. And therefore, if that's how we think, we develop strong attachment, strong wanting for pleasure, for gain, and so on and so forth, and develop strong aversion for pain, any kind of pain, for criticism. Some of us might find criticism so unbearable, to find others' opinion of us so burdensome. I do have a tendency myself, that life might be so much easier if I just shut myself in or shut the world out, like what we are doing now under lockdown, and just communicate with the world through the internet. The shut in, and don't see anybody else, don't have to deal with anybody that I don't want to deal with, and I have a perfect filter against all those criticisms, all those bad opinions, and so forth, and live my life like that, a life of extreme limitations. So Sue is saying, but reputation comes from what others think about us, can come out of gossip. What can we do about what people think of us? Our reputation surely shouldn't be governed by others' opinion. Well, as I said, reputation, by definition, are others' opinion of us. Whether it has any basis in reality, on facts or not, well, that is debatable. In fact, most of the time, reputation, and which is why the Buddha pointed out reputation or others' opinions sometimes are very fickle-minded, as we all are. We change our mind, we change our opinions. And so if we build our sense of happiness or unhappiness on reputation, it is a very kind of unreliable source of happiness, because in a single instant, our so-called good reputation can be destroyed, can be replaced. And we may not be responsible, we may not actually have done anything, but just one accusation is able to wipe it out. And so if we were to define happiness as always having others' good opinions, that happiness is very unreliable. In fact, I really seriously question whether would that be true happiness or not. So that's where we are at now. Really looking at our own definition of happiness, really investigating that, and really coming to see that maybe these 4 pairs of experiences, which are major concerns for a lot of us, whether we are aware of it or not. One way or another, our life is preoccupied with them. It's sort of, we live our life in between these four pairs of concerns, four pairs of contrasting experiences. And so how do we relate to them make a big difference to us? If we firmly define happiness on the basis of these four of them and make them our main concern in our life, in our pursuit for happiness, the Buddha is saying that may not be such a wise choice. If we really feel so strong attachment to getting pleasure, always gaining something, always experiencing praise, and good reputation, good opinions, and always trying or even feeling strong aversion towards the other four, we might actually be setting ourselves up for suffering, for disappointment, or at least for a life of dissatisfaction, because they are ever changing. They are always changing, switching from one to another. And despite our best efforts at control, we will never be able to fully succeed in controlling these changing experiences. Therefore, they are called the winds of worldly concerns. The world, all of us, are very concerned about this form. And like the winds, they come and go, they change, And so how we navigate skillfully make a big impact on our personal experience of happiness, of contentment and satisfaction. So that's what we are looking at, and I'm trying to tie this so-called conclusion to the four topics that we covered so far. And today, last week I talked about mindfulness as a skill that help us to navigate and help us to relate to, and in that occasion I relate to pleasure and pain, how mindfulness can help us to relate differently to pleasure and pain. Instead of having just attachment to pleasure and aversion to pain, is it possible for us to replace that and instead with mindfulness? With mindfulness that allow us to enjoy pleasure while it's here, or when it is reasonable to expect, but without this clinging, grasping attitude towards it, so that we actually might enjoy pleasure a lot more. And also in the face of pain that we can't avoid or we can't stop, that we are able to relate to it with mindfulness and with other more positive attitude, instead of feeling aversion, anger, frustration. So by changing the way we relate to these different pairs of experiences, maybe that is the way for us to find true happiness. So today, let's look at gain and loss. First, gain and loss is very kind of contextual. In certain context, gain is good, loss is bad. But in a different context, maybe loss is good and gain is bad. So it really depends on what we are talking about. What are we gaining and what are we losing? Yeah. But in a general way, most of us prefer to gain something, right? Something good, especially I'm talking about gain something that we regard as good or positive or pleasant, and we feel the pain of losses of what we hold dear. So and that is how I'm making use of these two words. Yeah. But nonetheless, this very much tied up when I was preparing for this talk. I was thinking gain is very much strongly associated with success in our society, isn't it? When we gain something, we are viewed as successful. When we fail or we suffer loss, then we are a failure. So there is a kind of judgment that comes along to this pair of experiences. We judge ourselves to be success or judge ourselves to be a failure. This is also triggered by a quote that I saw recently, a quote attributed to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I'm not sure whether he actually said it or not. These days, there are lots of quotes flying around on the internet and attributed to different people. A lot of that attributed to the Buddha, which I'm quite sure he probably didn't say any of that. Yeah. I think the quote says our world doesn't need more successful people. We need more kinder people, more compassionate people, and so on. Yeah. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. And that's how I relate that to what I'm talking about today, gains, isn't it? We quite often, even in myself, if I were to observe myself, I associate success with gaining something. This is particularly strong when you go back for school reunion, when you have to meet with old friends, old classmates. And this, of course, is the prime situation for comparisons. Then maybe at least in my case, it really heightened the sense that whether have I gained anything in my life, and what do we associate with the word success? And gains are a result, isn't it? So we work hard, we make choices, and we all hope that our actions bear fruit, bear specific fruit, the one that we really desire, that we really want. And we get very disappointed. We can get seriously depressed. That in spite of our hard work, in spite of our choices, our actions, we fail to achieve the result that we desire. Or in fact, sometimes more than not achieving it, we actually end up losing many things, losing money, losing opportunity, losing properties, and so on and so forth. So very strongly tied with our notion of success and failure. And in reaction to that, that's when our mind and our mood, our emotions will go up and down, right? We get very elated, we get very excited, we say, oh, I'm so happy when we gain what we desired, and we get really, really down, depressed and sad and hurt, confused when we experience loss. So, and how do, in the Buddha's teaching, how do we change our attitude so that our mind is not this yo-yo mind going up and down from the changing fortunes? Because the truth is, although our actions, our choices have a great impact on the result, but most of the time in life, the actual result that come forth depends on many more causes and conditions, isn't it? Not just my action, not just my choice, not just my wishes, but also depends on many things. Like, for example, on COVID-19, in spite of my best plan, best effort, whatever not, there's this external factor that has such tremendous impact. So in spite of my hard work, I could be experiencing gain during this period or great losses. Yeah. So it goes to show that our actions have consequences, different kind of results, but often we don't get to decide. It's not entirely up to us to decide what that result might be and when or where and how it will ripen. That degree of control is what we don't have. So our actions contribute conditions towards the result, but do not and cannot 100% determine all aspects of it. That's the bummer. That's the bummer part of it. Yeah. So if we are very result-oriented, then we might feel a great sense of loss of control, or the fact that we simply cannot control the outcome. And so in the Buddha's teaching, our attention is drawn not so much on the result, but on the cause of it. Highlight the fear, heighten the fear of death. Okay. I suppose death is a result. I don't know. It's also one of those things where we can't control. And also facing death is also to face the progressively loss of more and more control over many aspects of our life. So the way in Buddhism we work with this to help us to come to a more equanimous place is to emphasize the cause, emphasize the part that we can control, the part that we can influence, and that we can put more energy or attention to it, and we can do better, instead of focusing on the part that really is not entirely up to our control. The outcome of the coming together of so many different causes and conditions, we can't control all of them. So we focus our attention on what we can do about the situations, and then we learn, of course, to acknowledge whatever outcomes that come out at the end. And this is the basis of the practice of equanimity in Buddhism. And so I want to explain a bit of it, and then we'll do a meditation on equanimity. And I find that this is also another thing that we can cultivate that really help us to deal with the changing fortunes in our life. In this case, gain and loss can also be pleasure and pain, can also be praise and blame, and we can apply to all other different pairs of experiences, but particularly in relation to gain and loss. If we are too result focused, too result oriented, we might find that it doesn't make for a peaceful living, because it really depends. If the results go the way we desire, then we are very happy. If the result goes in the opposite, we are very depressed. And that is not the recipe for peacefulness, for peace and happiness and contentment. Yeah. So in the Buddha's teaching, then we have the quality of equanimity that we can cultivate. Equanimity allows us to relate differently to the changes in our life, the changing fortune in our life. And instead of being overwhelmed by attachment and aversion, we find a completely different way to respond to all these different changing experiences. We find a place of balance, of even peace and calmness, which is a quality associated with equanimity. And the way we cultivate equanimity, or the way I like to do it, is again by repeating a few phrases. And these phrases has to do with the Buddha's teaching on karma. So we will say to ourselves this phrase: we are owners of our actions. And if it's in relation to my happiness, then I will say, my happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. So as the word go, first is to reaffirm the teaching of karma, of action, that we are the owners of our actions. And our actions have consequences, and precisely because of that, those consequences impact us. And this is really quite common sense, because it's precisely we know our actions have consequences. That's why we are motivated to act. We're motivated to do this or not do that, because we know, those actions, those choices will impact the outcome, which affect us, which is what we want or don't want. Yeah. So we are the owners of our actions. But sometimes it's important to remind ourselves that my happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, that I do have a great part to play in my own experience of happiness or unhappiness, that it depends on my actions. Actions in Buddhism, just as a reminder, can be of three types. It can be, of course, physical actions, the physical behavior. Could also include verbal actions, actions of speech, action of communication. That is also actions that we do, how we communicate with others, how we communicate with ourselves. Those are also actions. Those also have impact. And lastly, mental actions, which are this kind of thoughts and intention that we nurture within ourselves. Fantasies and daydreams are not just fantasies and daydreams, like as if they are of no consequence. Of course, these days we often say that our daydreams are a waste of time. But I never thought so. I think daydreams, fantasies can be very powerful. Yeah. We are rehearsing something in our mind, for good or for bad, depending on what we are indulging in, what we are following. But our thoughts are not that innocent, then they can make a real difference to us. The kind of thoughts that we nurture in our daily life come to affect how we see the world, come to affect our own deeply held belief, our interpretation of the different experiences that come our way, and therefore also contribute to our happiness or unhappiness. So my happiness or unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself, which means although I might have a desire, a wish, or aspiration to be happy, but having that wish, which is perfectly normal, which is what we all do, but just having that wish is not enough. We must also actively and proactively create the causes and conditions. We also need to pay attention, to be mindful on what are the changing conditions in our life, outside or inside, and to respond appropriately to that. So this is the phrase that I will repeat when cultivating equanimity. The phrase themselves, is quite short, but over time, as we repeat it in meditation, it stirs up different thoughts, stirs up different reaction. Certain beliefs may surface, certain objections, personal objections, and also it triggers different things. And these are the raw material that we work with. What are some of my deeply held beliefs, which may not be in line with the Buddha's teaching, but nonetheless it's true for me. I might cherish a certain fantasy. I always have, for some bizarre reason, I have this fantasy that with enlightenment, I don't have to work anymore. Somehow money will just drop from the sky, and that's the end of my struggle of working for a living. Yeah. And although nobody ever said to me that enlightenment is associated with financial independence, but somehow I cherish that kind of idea in my mind. So this is a belief, something I held in. So a few years ago, I saw come to an epiphany and said, "Gee, that's not true." Even if it's a big if, of course, yeah. Even if I so happen to get enlightened, money will still not fall from the sky. That was a real bummer for me. I was really disappointed with enlightenment at that moment. Yeah. So when we practice equanimity, so some of this belief that we held within ourselves, but we are not so aware of, may surface, and there's a good opportunity to be mindful of them, to be aware, to investigate, and to consider or reconsider. And we apply that to the experiences of gain and loss. That sometimes the fact that we lose something, it is important to not think that losses are our fault and gains are our accomplishments. To not have that kind of association, to think that because sometimes losses come to us through many different causes and conditions. A lot of it may be beyond our control. And so instead of getting caught up and thinking that I'm a failure for not able to prevent that loss or not able to achieve that gain, the teaching of equanimity is pointing to the fact that I can keep coming back to the actions. Any new experiences come along is an opportunity for me to make a different choice, to nurture, a different response. So in these moments, what are the actions I choose to take or not take? So it's a very hopeful message that at any moment, regardless of what are my experiences, gains or losses, each new moment offer a new opportunity to practice the Dharma, to make a different choice, and to shape and create a different future for myself and others. Okay, so not sure whether that's making any sense, but so that is in relation to oneself. In relation to others, we say, just be careful of your tone when you say it. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. And this is a slightly different kind of situation in relation to another person's experiences of happiness and unhappiness, is to affirm their power of choice, the power of actions, their karma, and how that influence their experiences. And also to be clear of the line of responsibility that we can draw between ourselves and others, not to confuse that we can do our best to help someone, but they themselves also have to make the right choices, to nurture the right qualities, right attitudes, and beliefs within themselves in order for them to find happiness. Yeah. So it's not just entirely up to me. No, even if I might have a good motivation to help someone, and maybe in so doing, this will help us to not get so upset with others when they are not responding well to our help. They are not responding. They're not taking our wise advice to them. No, we know the best. No, we know what's the right thing to do, and so we have been giving them advice. But this seems to be not listening to me. They're not doing the right thing according to me. Yeah. So we can get upset with people. We can get anger, frustration, aversion towards them. And equanimity is a good antidote to that, to see where the line is drawn, that we do our part and they do their part. And together we can create a brighter future. But they are also responsible for the choices they make in their life. Not so much blaming them, but with each action, with each choice, that influence their share of happiness and unhappiness, they influence their future. And we cannot deny the power of those choices, those actions. Okay, letting go of controlling behavior. Yeah, in relation to others, yes, because others' behavior is also not under our absolute control. In fact, this topic of absolute control is a real bummer also. In spite of our best effort to control everything, control the room temperature, control this, control that, somehow things still manage to go wrong. Somehow things manage to slip through our grasp and spin out of control. Yeah. And so equanimity helps us to be equanimous in the face of loss of control. So let's do a meditation before we continue, and hopefully that gives us a basis, give us some personal experiences as we explore this topic of equanimity in relation to the gains and losses in our life. So take a few moments and adjust your body, find a comfortable, supportive posture for yourself, and for us to settle into meditation. So I just ring this bell to signal the start of the meditation. So take a few moments, allow the body to find its way into our meditation posture. Take care that your back is comfortable in the posture, upright if you are sitting on a chair, sitting on the floor, on a cushion, and straight if you are lying down on your back, lying on a firm surface. See if you can avoid tensing up your back muscles deliberately. We don't have to try hard to straighten the back. Just allow the back to adjust to find a natural, comfortable position for yourself. Take care that your posture is not introducing more tension or discomfort into the area of the spine, especially the neck and the lower back, which are more vulnerable areas. Rest your arms, your hands in such a way that they are comfortably supported so that you don't have to tense up your arm muscles or shoulder muscles to hold up your arms in some particular way. Feel free to close your eyes completely if you're more comfortable with that. Of course, you are most welcome to leave them open or half open, whichever works best for you. So I invite you to become aware of the sensations coming through at the points of contact between your body and your seat, your body and the ground. See if you can allow your body to feel that it is resting on the surface that is solid, firm, and stable, that provide good support to the body, keeping it well balanced and safe. And this is to trigger a natural process within our own body, a process whereby the body recognize that it is well supported, and therefore it does not need to be so tight, so tense. Automatically, it can begin a process of loosening up, of unwinding, releasing some of those tensions and contractions. And given time, the body may settle down comfortably into the posture. So next, I'm going to invite you to return your attention to your own body. See if you can, without much effort, just with a light touch, come back and be in contact with the different bodily sensations. Reconnecting the mind with the body really facilitate the body in adjusting and releasing more and more of those unnecessary tension and tightness. And more we can trigger what we call a relaxation response within our body. So let's start at the crown of the head. See if you can become aware of sensations at your crown. Without much effort, just a light touch. Notice whether there may be tingling sensations at the crown, a slight feeling of pressure, a sense of warmth or coolness, or maybe nothing at all, which is perfectly fine. And just allow attention, like water, to flow downwards, to spread. First, maybe down towards your forehead, touching the rest of the face, so that you become aware of sensations at your own face. Checking to see if you are unconsciously tightening any of your facial muscles. Are you tensing up the muscles of your forehead or those of the jaw? Are you tightening the muscles around your eyes? And if you are, see if you can consciously, gently relax the muscles of your face. Try your best to invite in a feeling of softening, a feeling of ease and comfort in your face as you let go of those tensions, those tightenings. How about sensations in the rest of the head? Sensations at the sides of the head, at the back of the head, and even inside the head. Notice simple sensations, nothing fanciful, nothing spectacular, a tingling sensation here or there. And then allow attention to flow downwards into the neck, touching the throat. Notice sensations here. And then onwards into the shoulders. How are your shoulders feeling today? So feel free to ignore me and proceed at your own pace. If we notice any discomfort at the shoulders or in any other part of the body, see if we can simply acknowledge those unpleasant sensations, those area of tightness and discomfort. And let them be for the moment, as most of the time they are not amendable to conscious relaxing. So just be aware of them while they're here. Let attention continue down both arms at the same time so that you become once again aware of sensations in the arms, sensations at your upper arms, subtle sensations at both elbows, sensations in your forearms, and all the way to both hands, sensations in the palm of your hands, the back of the hands, sensations in the fingers, all the way to the fingertips. And now that we are in touch with the sensations in both arms, see if we can gently release the weight of both arms. Allow it to rest comfortably on this support. Returning attention to our own chest, see if we can notice any sensations here. Maybe we sense the movements of the chest as we breathe in and out. Maybe we are able to notice the beating of our own heart. Or maybe we become aware of sensations at our upper back. We let attention continue downwards into the abdomen, noticing sensations at the level of the skin, sensations in the muscle layers, and maybe even sensations deep within the abdomen, sensations from the various organs here. We let awareness gathered at the pelvis so that we are aware of sensations at the pelvic region where powerful muscles gathered. Notice sensations from the various organs here. Feel the weight of the pelvis resting on its support. See if we can mentally give permission and allow that weight of the pelvis to rest comfortably on the support, on the cushion, on the floor. And then we allow attention to continue down both legs at the same time, starting from the hips. Notice sensations as we go along, arriving at the knees, down all the way to the ankles, and finally arriving at both feet. We feel the sensations in both legs, and as we activate those sensations, become aware of resting the weight of both legs comfortably on the floor or whatever support they are on. And see if we can give permission, release that weight, allow both legs to rest comfortably on their support. So we rest our body in the posture, we rest our mind with the body, in touch with bodily sensations. And we allow the release of tension and agitation in body and mind to continue on and on in the background as we turn our attention now to the actual meditation on equanimity. So I invite you to repeat slowly, mindfully, the few simple phrases conveying the idea of equanimity. Feel free to change the words if you want to, but see if you can stay close to your understanding of what it means to be equanimous in the face of changing experiences. We are the owners of our actions. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. We are the owners of our actions. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. A simple way to proceed is to simply rely on the phrases as a support and slowly, mindfully, at your own pace, repeat them to yourself in your own mind. Each time we finish one repetition, we wait a bit and see what comes forth from our own heart and mind in reaction to the phrases of equanimity. And then we can proceed, we can choose to reflect a bit on what come up, think a little bit about the meaning, how we understand equanimity. But always come back to the words, come back to the phrases, and start again. We are the owner of our actions. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. Coming back to the words, especially if you find yourself distracted, which is perfectly normal, slowly, mindfully repeat the words to yourself. We are the owners of our actions. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. Maybe you want to reflect a little bit. Have I been paying attention to the actions that I'm creating, to the choices I have been making? Or have I been more preoccupied with the results, with the outcomes, with the changing experiences in my own life? What I associate with happiness or unhappiness, with the gains and losses? Have I been spending more time lamenting on fortune, good fortune, bad fortune? Or have I been focusing more on my own actions, my choices, and how I can create a future for myself? We are the owners of our actions. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not merely on my wishes for myself. So coming back to the phrases of equanimity, feel free to continue reflecting on equanimity in relation to ourselves if you so wish. Or you might want to explore other aspects of equanimity in relation to someone else. And bring one person to mind. Picture the person in your mind's eye, and then repeat the phrases of equanimity directed at this person. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. So I like to just say the phrases in relation to this person and see what may be triggered by that. Images, thoughts, concerns, beliefs, whatever surface becomes food for thought for us to consider, to reflect. And then we can always come back to the phrases of equanimity. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. So coming back to the words, repeat the phrases, direct it at whichever person you have chosen to focus on. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. Sometimes you might want to, in the light of the phrase of equanimity, reflect a little bit on responsibility. What are we truly responsible for? What is it that we can truly influence and control? And what is it that is beyond our influence, beyond our control? And how each one of us have a part to play. Each one of us has certain power, certain choices, and how that impact our share of happiness and unhappiness. We are the owners of our actions. Your happiness and unhappiness depend on your actions, not merely on my wishes for you. So there is meditation on equanimity. Equanimity is one of the four, in Buddhism we call it the sublime abiding of the heart, together with loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy. The fourth one is equanimity. So it's a quality of the human heart. So one of the immeasurable qualities, because it is not limited in scope. We can extend it in an immeasurable fashion, in relation to not just ourselves, but the infinite sentient beings. But it's also one of the hardest to really understand what on earth is this equanimity. It's not indifference, it's not cold withdrawal, it's not unconcern, disregard. It's none of those states of mind. In fact, equanimity is, in the heart of equanimity, is great concern, great awareness and mindfulness, and great clarity also. Seeing things clearly, seeing causes and conditions, seeing responsibility, seeing what I can do and I cannot do, seeing what others' choices and actions have consequences. Consequences that is not dependent on my wishes, on my hopes or fears. So it is a difficult quality to sort of wrap our head around, but it's a valuable one to begin to explore and to reflect on. And it's also one of those qualities that really help us to relate to this the four pairs of worldly concerns, and to find a more constructive attitude in how we relate to them, how we deal with them. For example, with gains and losses. Equanimity allows us to, we can enjoy gains and yet at the same time, we can stay calm and composed in the face of losses. So it is actually very much tied in with strength and resilience of the heart, equanimity. Because in the absence of equanimity, that's when we become this yo-yo, this like a kite, that is with string cut, and therefore is at the mercy of the force of winds. It has absolutely no way to navigate. It's just sort of blown left and right, and will eventually crash somewhere. Yeah. And we don't want our heart to be like that, isn't it? To be so easily affected by the changing fortunes of our life, the gains and losses, and to be up and down, and eventually, instead of finding a safe landing, where the only result is to crash land somewhere, and to be destroyed by all these changing experiences in our life. That's not what we hope for ourselves or for others. And so equanimity is actually strongly associated with wisdom as well. Okay, so feel free to write any comments or questions if you have on what I'm covering today. So just to see whether I can, I hope it's not too confusing what I'm talking about. I'm trying to convey certain ideas I have in my mind, but not sure whether it's coming through clearly or not. Because I have a lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts about this, and I think it's a very important area to explore. Not so much to say that, I got it right or wrong, but to reflect a little bit, because there's a different perspective. In our world, including myself, I hold deep belief and opinions. I like to gain good things that I associate with happiness, with what I want, with pleasure. So gains are very attractive, isn't it? And of course, I dislike losses, especially what I hold dear. I don't want to lose them. And that's what I fear. That's what I dislike. That's what I have aversion towards. And sometimes in the midst of this, sometimes we talk about hopes and fears, this ups and downs, which is why I have this feeling that I can empathize with people who choose to be shut in. And that's finding life too much to deal with. All these ups and downs, gains and loss, it's just too painful, almost overwhelming. So what to do to survive is to impose severe limitations and to try to wrestle control back, from life. Life felt or experienced as completely out of control, or at least I can't control it. So what do? I impose extreme limitations. And I limit my life in an extreme way to a room, limit the in and out of it, limit the kind of people, or absolutely not seeing anybody at all. And within that severe limitation, only then can I feel safe, can I feel a semblance of happiness, although I'm not so sure how happy that is, but at least a semblance of control, and the price to pay for that is tremendous. So much of life out there is denied. I denied myself all of those experiences, all of those possibilities, simply because I can't deal with it. So that is not a recipe for genuine happiness, contentment, and satisfaction. But nonetheless, it's very real in our world. We may even know of people who might who make such a choice. So instead of falling into an extreme like this, what are my options? What is possible for me? And that is where I like to introduce this quality of equanimity, that is the sword of wisdom that Manjushri used to cut through ignorance related to equanimity. I don't know about that. We might have to ask Manjushri, are you equanimous? No, you wielding this sword and cutting and chopping all this ignorance. But definitely, for sure, when we are able to cut through our ignorance, which in this case, ignorance can be viewed as our grasping at certain views, wrong views, mistaken understanding, wrong belief. But nonetheless, we hold to it so tightly that because of that, it defines the kind of reactions, choices we make. So cutting through it help us to arrive at a different way to respond to this kind of changes in our life. Help us to be more equanimous in relation to it. Equanimous means a state of balance of mind and heart. I don't mean flatline. I used to joke about this, cultivating emotional balance. I used to joke that it's to be emotional flatline. You don't feel anything at all. No, not happy, no sad, no up, no down. But of course, there is a wrong understanding. To be equanimous doesn't mean you don't feel anything. You still have feelings. You can still feel sad. You're still affected by the changes in life, but they are modulated. You have great confidence that you can deal with whatever it is that's happening. That you can feel them. You have no fear of your own feeling. You don't fear the fact that I will be overwhelmed. I can't cope. This is killing me. No, you have great confidence, and therefore you are very open, receptive, and you are responsive. You are free to allow your heart to respond in whichever way, because I will be all right. And that is equanimity. It helps to modulate our responses and help us to, in fact, help us to respond appropriately to all these different changes. And it's deeply associated with wisdom, sometimes expressed in what we call the serenity prayer, I think. I can't remember what it is. Something like the courage to change what can be changed, and the serenity to accept what we cannot change, and the wisdom to tell them apart. Something like that. I didn't get it right, but wisdom, of course, has to do with understanding clearly what we can affect through our actions, through our choices, and therefore we actively do something about it. And what is beyond our control, what is simply not within our ability to change, at least not change easily, and to be able to acknowledge them and accept that. And wisdom, therefore, is linked to serenity or equanimity. Like, for example, we are currently in a situation of drastic changes, so shocking. Nobody can foresee it coming, and it's completely out of our control. And when it happens, we are caught up in it, for good or for bad. Of course, a lot of us are badly affected by it, but then there are other people that really benefited from it. And then today I saw a news or some report that says that people are really cashing in on these lockdown situations, which I can really understand. Online shopping has probably tripled or more, increased manifold while we are in lockdown situation. So changing fortune, and the reality is that we can affect some of the conditions and not others. And this is, of course, related to our interdependence, that we are all connected and we depend on one another, mutual dependence, which is not always a good thing, you can see. Because we are so interconnected, interdependent, changes here and there has repercussion elsewhere. And there's no way to completely isolate ourselves, completely block ourselves. We are so connected, and it's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing. So maybe it's neither. It is just a fact of life. The four things of which equanimity is the fourth. These are the four qualities of the heartfelt qualities. Loving kindness is one. Compassion, appreciative joy is the third one. Equanimity is the fourth one. So that's and maybe another occasion we can talk. The four of them, they support one another. Mm, is there anything else I want to elaborate on? So we can also apply equanimity to other pairs of experiences, pleasure and pain. So to be equanimous in the face of pleasure and pain doesn't mean that we don't feel pleasant sensation, we don't feel unpleasant sensation. It's not to be completely numb, right? Which is maybe another way sometimes we respond to that. Yeah. So equanimity is not numbness. Through equanimity, we feel pleasure, and therefore it help us to enjoy pleasure. Yeah. And we also feel pain, which is important. Not feeling pain is not necessarily a good thing. But the thing is, with equanimity, we can relate to them differently, and we can take appropriate actions. With pleasure, we can enjoy it while it's here, and not try to cling to it and try to make something that is changeable by nature to be unchanging, which is really what we try to do. We try to hold on to pleasure. We're trying to make something that is impermanent into permanent, and we are doomed to fail. And with pain is a message from our body and mind that something is not right. And so with equanimity, we can listen, listen and try to uncover to our best ability the causes and conditions for pain, and try to take the appropriate action to address it, to relieve ourselves of pain as much as possible. So although there might be a notion in spiritual circle that we shouldn't take any medication, definitely not painkiller, I'm not in agreement with it. I think recently I have toothache. It was pretty painful, yeah. And I get very cranky when I'm in pain, which is perfectly understandable, yeah. And I try to stay away from people because I would tend to spread misery when I'm in pain and when I'm cranky and irritable and not very reasonable also because I'm just in a bad mood, a foul mood. Right? So in that situation, having a way of taking some paracetamol to temporarily relieve the pain helps. And also under the influence of pain, our thoughts may not be the most clear, and definitely we have a strong aversion towards it. Yeah. So with equanimity, it doesn't mean I don't feel pain, but acknowledging the pain, I try to take appropriate actions, and occasionally when nothing can be done about it immediately, we also practice patience and to endure it, to tolerate it. Yeah. Okay, so that is what I have in mind. I hope you can see the connection between this pleasure and pain, between gain and loss, with our sense of happiness, our belief, our view in relation to happiness, and why in this small scope section of the stages of the path to enlightenment, the last part is to examine these four pairs of concerns and relate that to our understanding of happiness. It is to reveal the fact that if we define happiness, you say happiness equal pleasure, that may not be such a wise definition. It's like condemning ourselves for a certain part of our life to complete unhappiness, because when occasionally arise, when we are in pain, we don't choose to be in pain, but due to causes and conditions, it's almost like we are saying, if I'm in pain, there is no way I can be happy. Zero possibility. And if I'm so happen to have chronic pain, then that's it. I have to kiss happiness goodbye. And I thought that is not such a good definition. If we have a choice, maybe we should reconsider that. Because if we're so unfortunate as to land ourselves in pain, which do happen, not necessarily due to our own fault, we also hope to be able to, in spite of the pain, to be able to find peace, to be able to find happiness. So equanimity means living free from aversion and attraction. Is this correct? Yeah, equanimity means living without the influence of, without reacting with aversion or attachment. Because aversion and attachment in the Buddhist sense involve distorted understanding. Attachment involve a distorted understanding and exaggeration of the object we are attached to as the ultimate lasting source of happiness. And it is not. And aversion involves the distorted, exaggerated understanding that pain is the ultimate misfortune, or loss is the ultimate failure in life. So that's why we have aversion towards it. And then both of them, in the Buddhist sense, involve distortion in understanding. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain are just what they are. They are not ultimate happiness, nor are they ultimate success. They are also not ultimate unhappiness or ultimate failure. There is too extreme, and to hold on to that view create the causes for us to suffer when we encounter them. Instead, we try to think about, is it possible to define happiness or unhappiness differently? So I often say, I think I come to this conclusion very early in my study of Buddhism. I sort of figure out that Buddhism is not really about getting what I want. It's a real bummer, another one of those bummer. Because Buddhism is not going to assure that I will get all the things that I feel I need to be happy. It's not going to give it to me. The Buddha is not very generous in that sense. In Buddhism, what happens is the way to happiness is it will change my definition of happiness. It will change my view, my belief about what makes me happy. And by changing that definition, I might find, to my own surprise, that in spite of the ever-changing mix of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, and so on and so forth, I can still be happy and at peace and contented. How amazing that is! That that my happiness is no longer bound up with the changing experiences of my life. Changing experiences which the truth is I don't have absolute control over. And I don't need that absolute control anymore, because whether I encounter pleasure or pain or neutral sensations, with each one of them, I can still relate appropriately, differently. I can respond to them differently. And with each one of them, I can still, in one way or another, say I'm contented, I'm at peace, I'm happy. Although I wouldn't say I'm happy when I'm having the toothache, but I try not to be too disturbed and too upset by it. Yeah. So I think that is the secret of the Buddhist secret to happiness. So I think it's good to think about it. Don't necessarily have to take it on board, but it's just something maybe to stimulate us to reflect a bit and reconsider our life strategy for happiness. Maybe the one where we might be following so far, maybe not as good as this other one. So it's for us to reconsider. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for this week, and thank you very much for your attention. Please stay safe, even though restriction have been lifted to some extent, and hope to see you next week. Have a good week ahead. Good night.